Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of Hive Live. I'm Alex Netty, and thanks for joining us again after a hiatus in September. It's October, and it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so we have a great discussion for you today about our journeys as a team into cybersecurity. Before we dive in, if you've been following us here on Hive Live, make sure you stay up to date with all our great approachable cybersecurity content across all social media channels with our handle at Hive Systems. Be sure to follow or subscribe today so you don't miss out on the latest cybersecurity news and free guides developed by our experts. Cybersecurity is an industry as wide as many other more established ones, with lots of jobs that aren't just hacking. And how people enter that field is just as diverse, including their roles in previous jobs. So today we're going to talk about our journeys, how we got here, what we did before cybersecurity, and some of the things we've done in the industry since. It's going to be a very interesting discussion, and we have brought a number of folks from the Hive Systems team, including Katie, Corey, and Andrew. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, Alex.
Good to be here.
With that, I think the most logical place to start, of course, is with our education and background. One of the most interesting things today is that there aren't a lot of educational and specifically higher educational offerings around cybersecurity. And so the number of folks who have entered the field have come from a large, diverse number or diverse set of backgrounds. And our team is no exception to that. Up first, Katie, I'm going to call on you. Tell us a little about what you studied in college, where you studied, and how that kind of took you out to your first job.
All right. So I went to University of Maryland, and I actually changed my major a handful of times during undergrad, everything from engineering to pre-physical therapy, pre-veterinary, kind of dabbled in a lot of different things before I figured out what I wanted to do. And ultimately, I ended up getting my degree in accounting in the business school. So not exactly hand in hand with cybersecurity, but there was still quite a bit of overlap. So fresh out of college, I did start in an accounting industry. I worked with Deloitte. I was doing federal forensic accounting with them for a short period of time before ultimately switching over to PwC into an information assurance role. So that's kind of the introduction I had into the cybersecurity field, was with that overlap between accounting and audit and your IT audit type of work. There's quite a lot of the same steps, a lot of same processes between both financial accounting and IT auditing type of work. So it wasn't until after I got into PwC and was doing that information assurance that I went back to school and ended up getting my master's in cybersecurity.
That's great. Up next from our team, I'll pass it over to Andrew. Tell us a little bit about where you went to school and how you kind of entered out from after school and eventually into cybersecurity.
Sure, and I think there's definitely going to be some common themes here amongst our group on origination and undergraduate studies. So I started off in computer science in Virginia Tech, and I was in that program for about 2 years and realized that maybe sitting there developing and coding wasn't exactly for me. So I ended up switching over to actually mass media communications. I really wanted to get into like on-air motion graphics, but I liked the the fact that it kept me technologically aligned with some of the stuff I was doing previously. So I ended up graduating with a degree in mass media communications and a couple of minors in humanities and theater arts, actually, which, some people look at me and they're like, well, yeah, I try to do a little bit of the acting thing. After college, I ended up going back up to New England, where I was born, and I actually did try to do some of the acting bit for a little bit in between career paths there. So I started off my career journey in professionalism as a broke actor a little bit, and after that, I ended up getting a job at PwC, ironically, like two of my colleagues here on the call, and that was in information security, predominantly focused on controls testing and federal frameworks. So I ended up working at PwC for about 9 years, I think it was 8 years before the sale to Guidehouse, working mostly in IT control testing and yeah, that's basically just how I got my start in cybersecurity. Was kind of lucked into the job at PwC and then worked my way up. I ended up basically kind of just like thrown into the fire. You know, like a lot of us are. We get thrown into the fire, so I ended up having to learn a lot on the fly. And luckily, I had a lot of good mentors and teachers at PwC that I can, you know, definitely credit with you know, teaching me the ropes and getting me to push myself into learning new things and identifying opportunities. So yeah, that's basically how I got into cybersecurity.
Yeah. A diverse and wide story as well. Corey, I know you also have a wide and diverse journey into cybersecurity.
Yeah, I changed majors from biochem and pre-med to philosophy in my undergrad. Went on to get a dual master's in cybersecurity intelligence and forensics after that. I was exploring my options, but I had to work to pay for college, so I picked up a few hours in several places every week at the university I was going to. So I worked at a research farm, fitness center, complex systems, stable isotope mass spectrometry lab, ecology and mycology research lab, and then also desktop support for students and faculty. Yeah, so I was exploring and trying to find what I was interested in for the most part. And then I guess we'll talk about this later, but like how did that all converge? I'll get to.
Yeah, that sounds great. From my side, yeah, also had an interesting journey through college. Originally started out studying aerospace engineering. Didn't love that. Switched over to business. And actually, my first job out of college was managing a restaurant, which I enjoyed the fast pace of that life and everything else. But at the end of the day, I think that was a temporary stop for me as I worked in a restaurant for a while, and it's a tough life, no doubt. But eventually came over and started working for a small cybersecurity startup. And yeah, Andrew, to your point, you know, trial by fire in terms of learning and learning on the job. A lot of cybersecurity, I think, today is just curiosity and trying to find and discover new things. And my career has been over a decade since. So yeah, interesting and roundabout way. But I think the most important point in all of these stories is that there doesn't have to be some perfect path where you have to have some cybersecurity undergraduate degree or master's or even certifications necessarily to get into the industry. And admittedly, all of our stories are probably more dated now than we care to admit, but I think they still ring true even for people who are having that same journey today. I did just mention something that I think could take us to our next question here. Ultimately, the cybersecurity industry has been well defined by certifications, given that's a little bit more technical. I think for all of us, we've looked at various certifications. Some we have pursued, some we have not. And so I'll do a round robin to talk about what certifications you currently have, and if there are other ones that you think are just generally important for the industry at large. Andrew, I'll let you start this one.
Sure. So I started off first by getting the CISA, the Certified Information System Auditor, and Information Security, one of those two. And that was, yeah, you know, I actually got that, I think, in like 2013. So it's been quite a while since I've gotten that one. And that one was really useful, putting that towards like the audit and controls testing that we were doing, and helped kind of create like a framework of knowledge as we're going into those engagements while we were doing the consulting at PwC. After that, I was also doing pen testing at the time, so I ended up getting a certified ethical hacker. That one is something that like is more of a specialized certification that you really don't need unless you actually are doing pen testing. I don't think it's that useful for most cybersecurity practitioners, anybody on the consulting side, unless you're doing pen tests. There were a couple that I didn't pursue while I was doing some of the pen test work. A lot of the SANS certifications. So I ended up taking courses for like general reverse engineering malware, GSEC, and a couple of the general penetration testing ones. But the courses I found more useful than the actual certification. And since I had the other ones, a lot of the requirements that we had for contracting were already met, so I didn't want to pursue the exams. And then finally, I just ended up getting my CISSP after years of putting that off, mostly out of anxiety and fear, but also because I just, I'm not one of those great test takers, and I heard that test was a bear. But I just passed that exam recently and got my CSSP, so that is the creme de la creme from where we're sitting, and so I'm happy about that.
That's right, and congrats again to Andrew for achieving that. Corey, on your side, I believe you also have a CISSP, but what else have you studied for? What else do you think is important in the industry?
When I was in doing my undergrad, I got my Security Plus certification, CompTIA. Having the Security Plus and simply starting my cybersecurity master's program made my entry-level job application very competitive, I found. I would even say, you realize I'm still in the graduate program, right? And that I really just have the Security Plus. And they said, yeah, because it shows like how interested you are in this, and you're not just like making up that you're interested in this for the job. And so I think Security Plus is a low cost and high value certification to stand out, because a lot of employers are filtering based on something, whether they want to or not. And sometimes it is just the certification, and you can pick up a book and study for Security Plus with minimal knowledge in cybersecurity. I do think IT support helps because you get to learn about people and obviously technology. After my first couple of cybersecurity jobs, and after I finished my master's in cybersecurity, I did get my CISSP. The term cybersecurity is becoming as general as saying you work in an industry. So we're almost at the point where it's like, when you're saying which certifications should you get for cybersecurity, it's like asking which certification should you get to work in healthcare, without knowing if you want to be a dentist, radiologist, surgeon, or hospital administrator. I think cybersecurity is like oftentimes for like the village barber or physician who's expected to treat maladies of all kinds in a lot of positions. And so what CISSP shows people is that you know enough to be that person. So like they know how to treat common abrasions, infections, maladies. But if someone from the village comes with a novel illness, they also know what books they need to pick up and what people they need to talk to back at the city. I think that's personally, I think that's where cybersecurity is right now. And at Hive, we're like those experts at the city that people come to, because now we have more than certifications. We have a lot of experience, and they can come to us for the specialized cases. But for anybody that wants to go in and just like be able to provide a wide array of services and benefits for a company, I think CISSP is the way to go. But yeah, it is a tough test. I think some people say that it tests like an inch of a mile of cybersecurity. It's a superficial knowledge across the full spectrum of cybersecurity topics, and converge, the basics. And like I said, where to look for answers when you don't.
I think that's a great point you brought up about the certification applicability. At this point, cybersecurity is now quickly maturing as an industry, whereas originally it was kind of one key idea, and it was maybe hacking or something along those lines, as we'll talk about here shortly in terms of the roles in the industry. There are a number of diverse roles, and Corey, to your point, I think there's a number of certifications that are starting to align better to those individual roles. Katie, tell us a little about your certification journey and experience, including maybe some non-security related certifications you were pursuing.
So I also am a certified information systems auditor like Andrew. It came in handy with the security controls testing back at PwC. And I am looking at potentially getting the CISSP in the next year. In my experience from a recruiting standpoint, to Corey's point, I do think that a lot of companies now for IT and cybersecurity roles are looking for at least the Sec Plus in a lot of their candidates to just be competitive. That being said, I also, from my experience, know that a lot of certifications does not necessarily translate to a lot of skill and knowledge. I know there's quite a few people out there who can study and take the test and have the letters on paper to say that they've got the certification, but they don't necessarily have the skill, the work experience to back it up. So I think, especially in this field, a certification only takes you so far. The field is changing all the time. So a lot of it is also coming down to having the drive to go out there and look for the information, to learn more, to stay on top of the trends and changes in the cybersecurity field, and not so much about having every single certification under the sun that you could potentially have. So for me, I think it's a little bit of a red flag if someone's got a whole ton of different IT certifications, but not so much on their resume to back up the skills that come along with that, with those certifications. So I would say CISA has been valuable to me from the security controls testing and IA standpoint. I think CISSP is valuable. Sec Plus is pretty valuable. But again, to Corey's point, it's very superficial over a large span of cybersecurity. whereas some of the other certifications, depending on what area of cybersecurity you're in, can be much more valuable, like your CEH if you're into pen testing and things like that. So it kind of comes down to what area of cybersecurity you're looking at, what you want to get into. There's just a lot of variables and a lot of different certifications out there that all carry different weight depending on what you want to do.
Katie, I think that's an interesting point. I think, yeah, for certain certifications, it can be helpful to show that you are prepared to move into maybe a certain segment of the industry, that you have the knowledge to move into some new area that maybe you haven't previously had experience in. I think you're also right. Yeah, there's a potential opportunity with the certification to validate some of your experience in the past for what you have done. I think the CISSP is a good example of that because it has that work experience requirement of 5 years associated with it. But yeah, collecting certifications is probably not as good as collecting experiences. As you probably said, yeah, a lot of interview questions are focused on, tell me about a time when, but you can't really say, well, on my CISA test, I answered a question about that. That's not a real world work experience. From my side, yeah, I skipped the Security Plus, thought about taking it and didn't. And then time flew by, and I eventually took the CISA and sat down for that to get kind of that control framework basis. And then also probably much later than I should have, finally sat and passed my CISSP as well. All of those things, yeah, I think from that side helped, one, maybe codify some of my knowledge, and B, potentially for people who are outside the cybersecurity industry, validate my knowledge associated with it. It is maybe hard for a lot of people to understand from outside of the cybersecurity industry what it means and what our past experience means. So sometimes having those certifications can be something useful as kind of a milestone for them to look at and say, you have a certification from that industry, so you must know what you're talking about. So there's definitely pros and cons. I think that fit all together, notwithstanding as higher education starts to create more cybersecurity certifications there and majors and masters, I think it's also going to be really useful from a resume standpoint. All right. We hinted at this earlier, but yeah, Corey, as you said, the CISSP focuses on the industry at large. So it's, yeah, a mile wide and an inch deep. And I think that's because there's a lot of different pieces that are starting to fit into the cybersecurity industry at large. So our next question, therefore, is what jobs and roles have you held in the cybersecurity field? Man, most of us here have consulted in some form or fashion, which means as a result, what we have done has probably varied immensely. Off the top of my head, maybe I can kind of walk through my journey. So I started a little bit more in what's considered information assurance, a lot of controls testing, validating how things work and whether they meet those controls. That pivoted into my curiosity to maybe be more technical and move into more technical based roles like vulnerability management, working in a SOC, so looking at events and things that are happening on a network. Eventually, later on, I moved out more into overall program management, so defining frameworks and controls and policies. And then now, I don't even know what I do. I guess strategy, a little bit of everything. Trying to connect all those pieces together and build that impact between programs to make sure that they're not siloed. All of that is to say that there is a lot more that's out there, including meeting compliance work, which I've done a little bit of as well. Not a little bit, I've done a lot of that. And probably a bunch of other stuff. I don't want to steal the thunder from the rest of you guys because some of us have overlaps. Corey, though, I will call on you. What have you done in terms of jobs? You've probably done some stuff I've done as well. In fact, I know you have.
Yes. In terms of like journey, I mean, where I started in philosophy coursework, I was drawn by the critical analysis and modeling of how people think historically. And then I worked in IT, like I was saying, and some more technical jobs. And I think I was wandering and trying to find like what are places, where can I work? What can I do that kind of involves those things and combines those traits? And came up with technology heavy intelligence analysis. And I interviewed a bunch of intelligence analysts and program directors, and they all said the field was saturated and that I needed to be fluent in this spoken language and culture, and that they'd inevitably, but then they would inevitably finish with, or information security stuff, because they knew that was like an up and coming field. So to hedge my bets, I split my remaining undergraduate time between Arabic language and early Islamic philosophy courses and trying to explore information security. I tried to talk to as many people as I could who did security at the university, and eventually one took me on for a few hours a week, invited me to come with them to the local ISSA meetings, the chapter meetings. And I just asked a lot of questions, gave my outsider perspective. Eventually, somebody from EMC RSA asked me if if I could interview for a risk analyst associate position. I did. Got that job, took a semester off so I could do that, and just provided bits of support across their global security organizations. So like their risk assessments, their day-to-day operations, PCI recertification, information security inbox. I think I spent 2 days a week shadowing and questioning RSA engineers about how they do stuff and how they monitor. And after the final year of college, I applied for security, or during the final year of college, I applied for security jobs, finished the and applied to security master's programs. And that's when I studied for the Security Plus. And so then my first real job, where it was not just like a few hours a week, was at a federal defense credit union, where I was technically a risk analyst, but I was really a generalist, again, with the whole village physician thing, where you do like a little bit of everything. You're doing a little bit of you're a SOC analyst, you're doing risk assessments, you're trying to strategize how to implement controls in that environment. And that's also when I discovered and started making my own quantitative risk assessment tools. So then it was Bloomberg, where I was a SOC analyst. It's also where I met Alex. And then Dell SecureWorks, where I was a generalist again, but for clients. And then NYU, where I would say, a generalist, and now Hive Systems. And I use generalist in a way that's not really it's not the right term, but I'm just some way to describe that, like, you're doing multiple things, really a lot of things, full stack cybersecurity person, doing a little bit of a lot of things.
I feel like that describes probably a lot of what all of us have done over the years. Katie, tell us a little about your experience.
Yeah, so similar to both Alex and Andrew, I started out doing security controls testing, information assurance. My first job in the cybersecurity world was in PwC, but I was there for a couple years before actually having the opportunity to join the Department of Defense and do cyber threat intelligence work. So that kind of allowed me to get into a little bit more research and kind of have that cross between understanding the security controls that help defend against the threats, and what those threats are, what vulnerabilities they exploit, how they're doing it, what intrusion vectors they're using, and all of those things. So it really allowed me to, as an analyst, expand my skill set and knowledge of what the threats are in the cybersecurity world and how we defend against those threats. But then also, as a manager of the analysts in that group, also understanding the strategic level, like what we want to focus on, what's important for information sharing purposes, how to try to get the industry to share information and work together when it comes to cybersecurity, which is very difficult. Before ultimately coming and joining Hive Systems, where now, as a subject matter expert, I get to bring that knowledge, my information security testing knowledge, and all kinds of different experience in cybersecurity to my clients here.
That's great. And Andrew, since you're last here, likely we've probably said a lot of what you've done as well over the years, but was there anything we missed or that you want to hit on as well?
No, I'll just give the the 10,000 foot view there. I started off. I should have mentioned before that while I was doing the acting thing, I was also working as a sysadmin part time to pay the bills, because the acting wasn't putting bread on the table. So I have a lot of technical background in just working with computers, just to build my own as a kid, as a hobby. Pick them apart, put them back together, repair them, blue screen of death fixes, all that stuff. So I had this like natural proclivity and draw towards technical controls and things like that. So when I started at PwC, I started in that technical control tester realm, working on diagnostic testing of like Unix systems, mainframes, Windows systems, stuff like that. And that parlayed over into the penetration testing and web application security testing as well. Having that technical knowledge was something that a lot of people lacked at PwC. So I got, they drew straw that put me into the pen testing line of service there. And that was stuff that, really kind of like ignited my passion for cybersecurity, because one, it's fun. You work late hours in the dark, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., and you get to beat on systems and try to find your way in. Brute force anything, stick to the rules of engagement, that sort of thing. But it was fun because I liked researching ways to abuse vulnerabilities and find my way in using cool tools like Metasploit, Kali Linux, stuff like that. So that really ignited my passion for cybersecurity to start. And then I decided, I really liked hacking into systems, well, ethically hacking into systems, but I also wanted to be the person that helped my clients, fix those gaps and fix those risks that somebody like me coming in from an audit or a pen test would ultimately find. So that then translated into a lot of cyber process improvement and risk and vulnerability management. So I worked for a few years supporting federal clients with cyber strategy, cyber process improvement, and risk and vulnerability management type stuff, gap remediation, all those fun things. Everything on the other side of the audit and the assessment type work, where somebody drops a list of vulnerabilities or a list of risks on you, and you've got to go work on that. So helping clients approach those and absorb those and implement the remediations, and then working through that, I ended up moving on to a job in the private sector, leaving the consulting side of the shop for a little while, moving in the private sector on the internal side, working in both compliance and kind of a little bit of a security engineering overlap, working with a lot of cloud tools. So getting hands-on, and that was my call. Was like, I wanted hands-on. I like working with tools. I like learning how to play in cloud environments, working with containers, working with all the technology that the engineers and the administrators and the developers use. I wanted to get my hands on that so I could understand them better. And I think like my journey has given me that opportunity, from pen test to just assessing controls and then working on the internal side of the shop. Now I'm back here in consulting, and it really helped me with my CISSP exam too, right? Having that hands-on knowledge of some of the technology, the network stack, the things that people actually use to secure systems, really helped in the CISSP preparation and exam. And now I get to bring those to my clients and serve as a SME and kind of bridge the gap between, very high level, obscure compliance language and control requirements and the technical implementation and how you can meet those things. So that's what I like to do with my clients now, is kind of like translate the NIST, obscure language to human usable, engineer usable, administrator usable language. And that's just basically, a culmination of my journey so far.
Well, and you touch on something interesting there, Andrew, which is a good segue to my next question here for the floor, is how do you stay on top of cybersecurity? Andrew obviously just lists off a bunch of different technologies that for some of our viewers, they may be unfamiliar with.
Sure.
And I think one of the hardest parts is this field has continued to grow rapidly, both in terms of the roles and jobs that exist in it, but also the technical know-how that goes with it. Corey, what are your top methods and ways to stay on top of the world of cybersecurity, to stay ahead of the latest trends?
I think to keep a general pulse, it helps to attend your local ISSA, ISC squared, whatever institute chapter meetings, because you can discuss your problems and hear what other people are actually experiencing and how they're dealing with them. I think that's much more valuable than a lot of people realize, because the surveys and the reports that you're reading are over such a large population. When you talk to people that you know and understand how they talk at these chapter meetings, become a regular, you can really get a lot out of those. I also explore topics that are on the fringe of my knowledge through meetups. You can filter by virtual if needed. That's been particularly useful recently, or I guess not recently anymore. But attending specialized conferences that you actually get something out of, whether it's general social interaction, genuine social interaction, or the content of the workshops. But yeah, it depends on your specialization, curiosities, budget, what workshops and trainings are available, and with or without certification. But follow your medium. If you tend to listen to podcasts, do that. If it's watch videos, do that. Read things, subscribe. Gotta find what works.
Those are all good ones. And yeah, along that lines, and as we talk about this, Andrew, I'll let you go next year, of course. For those who have achieved a CISSP, there are some continuing professional education requirements to go with it, where a lot of these certifications force you to continue to learn. So you've got to go find not just sources to learn new information, but valid sources to be able to meet these CPEs. Andrew, how do you stay on top of the latest cybersecurity news and happenings, and even just technology in general?
Yeah, so I'm much more of like a self-learner type. So I like to get my hands on things and play around with them, and so one of the things that I actually really enjoyed working in audit, which it's a dirty word I know in most industries, working in audit, was that I get to sit in a lot of the walkthroughs. I get to lead the walkthroughs with engineers and with the SMEs at organizations and see how they're implementing security. And I get to do that across a lot of clients. So I get to see all the different types of technology that they're using to meet a control or to implement a control or a process. And that was fun to me because I could see, and that was like basically early on, that's how I learned, is I would sit in a meeting and I would say, what the heck is this thing? And I'd go research it for hours. I'm one of those Google black hole people that I will research that, and then I'll follow it down the rabbit hole to the next technology, the next process. So getting your hands on things, sitting in walkthroughs is my favorite way to learn. And then Corey mentioned something kind of like fringe, other types of pursuits that kind of lead back to security. One of the things that I know everybody's going to roll their eyes when you say blockchain or crypto, but I got into that in like 2016, 2017. And one of the things, I didn't want to feel stupid talking to people about that. So I went and did a lot of research, and there is a lot of overlap in security and cryptography that is borrowed from blockchain and crypto that's used in other security pursuits and in general IT and technology pursuits. So I really dug into the resources, white papers, things of that nature that I could to learn about cryptography and the way these these very, very complicated basically linked lists work together. The other thing that was really helpful was having mentors, people I could bounce questions off of. Now I had managers when I first started at PwC who their response to a question was to let me Google that for you and send that to me, and that's where the Google mentality comes from. Google foo is an underrated quality, but I did have great mentors at PwC who were able to explain things to me that I didn't quite understand or grasp, and that went a long way. And I think finally, just being a curious person, and if you don't want to feel like you are the dumbest person on a call, like me, I don't ever want to feel like I'm the dumbest person on a call. So if I don't understand something that's being said, I'm in the computer or I'm trying to find a reference that I can do a quick crash course on. That's the biggest thing for me is like I'm an internet consumer. So if it's out there, it's on the internet. So just use it.
Andrew Bradley, cryptocurrency hipster. You heard it here first. Katie, for a while, your job was staying on top of the news in the threat intel space. What best practices or approaches did you learn from that industry, and what do you still carry on today?
So I do have to second a lot of what Andrew said. For me, a lot of it is just kind of on the job. Being able to track things down, Google something, go down the rabbit hole, pull all the threads until I get the big picture and can translate that into something that's a little more sensible for someone who's maybe not as cybersecurity minded. So for me, again, a lot of it is just kind of on the job as things change, just kind of consuming that, staying on top of it, being able to translate that and bring it back to our clients. In the threat intelligence world, a lot of it was just reading cybersecurity news, whatever's out there. I mean, there's a ton of overlap between your news sites about the different vulnerabilities that are being exploited, about what different ransomware groups are active, what different hackers are trying to steal and get into. So it was just a lot of staying on top of cyber news and seeing what was being exploited, what vulnerabilities were out there, what 0 days had proofs of concept or not, and how to mitigate those and get that information out as soon as possible. So it was really just a quick churn of being on top of cyber news often and then sharing that information as quickly as possible. So it came down to a lot of just triaging and understanding what was important to our customers and what was going to be more in play in their environment, what type of technologies that they might have in place or what technologies they work on for the government, so that you could know what hackers might be interested in going after their company, what tactics those hackers were using. So it really was just a lot of kind of reading a lot of cyber news, and I still do that now. And I mean, within our own team, we share a lot of cyber news with each other to keep on top of different trends and the latest changes and what's important in the cybersecurity field.
Oh, I did forget something there. I should have said Hive Lives.
Oof. What an incredible resource for the best, latest, greatest information. All of that is true, right? Finding trusted sources. To echo a lot of what you guys said, obviously, not all news is the same. Security Twitter can be useful. It can also be a cesspool of misinformation and marketing pitches. But to echo what some other people here said, curiosity for me is the big thing. A lot of it is being curious about what's going on and asking questions when you have questions. So a lot of times we'll show up and be working with a company and they go, oh yeah, we use, Purple Elephant for our endpoint management tool, or we use Purple Elephant. And I go, I have no idea what Purple Elephant is. Quick Google later, I find out, yeah, it's endpoint management. It does configuration management and a little bit of antivirus. Great, right? I can name about 6 other products that do the same thing, but I now know just with that quick little Google search what that tool does in the ballpark. Is it as capable as other tools? I'll find out in time, but at least as I'm having maybe that initial discussion, I have an idea of what they have in place. And it's just that curiosity to not say, yeah, Purple Elephant, and write it down. It's to go, what is that tool doing? I need to go back and research it. Is it as capable as CrowdStrike or not as capable? Where does it fall short? What's it cost? Who's it owned by, right? Kind of pulling together all that information in one place and thinking about it. To me, that's always just been curiosity. So being curious about what's going on, being curious about how things work and how things are changing is probably the best way to stay on top of it. That does take us, I think, to a great question here. And we touched on this a little bit earlier with some education and certification backgrounds. Katie, I'm going to let you start off with this one because you talked a little bit about it from the recruiting perspective. But what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to get into cybersecurity? What are some of the things they should do, maybe not do, things that they might waste their time on, or things they should prioritize?
So Alex did steal my thunder a little bit with the answer to the last question. I think it is critically important when you're interested in getting into cybersecurity to be curious, to want to go digging for more information. The cybersecurity field is constantly evolving. You're going to always be looking up new information. And if you don't have a desire to do that, then this might not be the field for you. In conjunction with that, I would say it's important, if you're coming from a different IT field, to kind of understand where the overlaps are between IT and cybersecurity so that you have those applicable and translatable skills. Even if you're not coming from IT, there's always going to be some skill set that overlaps. I mean, all of us kind of came from a different background than cybersecurity, but there were translatable skills that we were able to bring over. And then our own interest in the subject and our curiosity and our drive to learn is what really opened up those doors to get into cybersecurity, let us kind of get some exposure and find our way in just by seeing what else was out there, seeing what we could get into, seeing where that overlap was between our skill set and the cybersecurity world, and kind of make that case for ourselves to get into those areas of cybersecurity. As we kind of talked about earlier, some certifications are more worth it than others. So depending on what area of cybersecurity you're trying to get into, do your research, see what certifications, look up jobs that you are interested in and see what certifications they're looking for, what they're recommending, see if there's a consistency across different job postings of, oh, okay, well, quite a few of these companies want the Sec Plus, quite a few of these companies want the CEH, quite a few of them want CISSP, and maybe pursue those rather than spending your time on certifications that aren't as desired in the particular job field that you're looking for. And then depending on if you want to go get more schooling, you can always go back to do cybersecurity programs. Don't think it's necessary. Depends entirely on where you're starting from, whether or not you want to take that avenue to learn, or if you want to do certifications instead, or a combination of both. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there to take advantage of to get more into the cybersecurity field.
That's a great point. I think that's a big part of it is, there are a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of programs. As many of you may have known, last week was Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week, where NIST and CISA from DHS are trying to let people know about the diversity of opportunities that exist in the field, notwithstanding the massive job shortage that currently exists within the cybersecurity field. I don't even know what the number is up to now, but there's a huge deficit in terms of cybersecurity practitioners in both the United States and worldwide. So yeah, seeking those opportunities and finding ways to get involved is really the best way, in my opinion, to start to get into cybersecurity. As we've noted here, and we'll post some links in the show notes here, there's a lot of different jobs and roles that exist in cybersecurity that don't necessarily exist or you may not know about. And so there may be something that actually lines up better with your skills than you think. And that may give you that in and that foothold to be able to tailor your resume and maybe seek out opportunities that meet those moments. Andrew, what would you give as far as advice to someone who's trying to get into cybersecurity?
Yeah, I have to echo everything Katie said. Curiosity is probably the biggest quality that you should strive for to be successful in cybersecurity. But there's a couple of other things that I kind of picked up along the way, and one of those is make friends wherever you go. Right. So if you're a cybersecurity auditor, if you're a compliance person, you're a security engineer, make friends with people in the organization that are doing other things, and people in infrastructure, people in cloud automation, people in site reliability. Make friends there and have an open discourse with them to the point where you can ask them questions, because they're the best people to learn from. If you're trying to understand how to secure Kubernetes containers, go talk to the infrastructure folks, go talk to the application folks, and they'll give you a crash course, just for free. You don't have to go take a course, so you don't have to go do some Google digging. Maybe the people you're talking to at the organization can fill in your knowledge gaps for you. So that's why it's important to always make friends and be friendly with the people. It's never an us versus them type deal. Even if you're an auditor and it's internal security and you're auditing somebody, never make it about an us versus you scenario. One, it kind of closes people off to you. You lose the learning opportunities, and it makes your job that much harder. The other advice really is just put yourself in other people's shoes. Cybersecurity is one of those things where it's easy to tell people what to do, especially from the compliance side and the audit side. It's easy to tell people what to do, but it's a lot harder to put yourself in their shoes and see what kind of disruptions that causes for them, right? So they're going to have to rearrange their schedules. They're going to have to go get more resources. They're going to have to do a lot of things to make maybe this one control that you're telling them about happen. And that's some of the things I think a lot of organizations kind of lose sight of, is that it's a team. Everything is a team effort. And once you start putting people against each other, whether it's security versus development or security versus infrastructure and admins and DBAs, it just makes everything that much harder to do. You lose accountability, you lose responsibility, and it just isn't the conducive environment for positive security improvement and positive security. So I think that's a really key thing for people to remember as you're stepping into the cybersecurity world in a career here is, always be open-minded, always put yourself in other people's shoes, and make friends.
I think that's good. Corey, what about you? What would you recommend for people who are trying to get into cybersecurity?
We've talked about it a lot, but get your Security Plus, and you'll be more competitive than all the people that don't have it.
Good point.
You might not agree with the value of certificates. I did not. I was very cynical about both. I thought certifications were dumb. Still kind of do. But the thing that I learned is that your potential managers also might not care and think certificates are dumb, but they typically have to justify hiring you to someone above them, that they don't want to take the time to do a whole presentation about who you are, and how that's important and what you need to know. So the certificate, it empowers the person, your hiring manager, to hire you more than anything. And if once you get that certificate and you get in and you start getting things into your resume, or you get education into your resume, you can use that. So I would say at least one certification. Security Plus you can do pretty early on. Also, if you find jobs or companies that interest you, find the contact information and ask them if you can meet with them. This is kind of make friends thing. Even someone on the team, because if you're fascinated by their work and you tell them that, and you say, I just want to explore what the field is like, I'm sure they'll be happy to help you. And then on that note, the most common thing I see is people saying that they don't meet the prerequisites for the job, 40 years of experience and whatever crazy things. Still ask for a 30-minute call with the person who's posting that job. and just say you're crafting your education, your career, your educational path, and your training path to qualify for positions like this one. In best case, they say, oh, don't worry about those requirements. They're canned. And they just give you an interview anyway. Worst case, they give you a trove of knowledge that helps you get the skills you need. And either way, you formed a relationship or maybe a friend with somebody in the field. Last thing was really important for me is that if you're in a metropolitan area, if you're not in a metropolitan area, be willing to have a 2-hour commute for your first job or couple jobs. Widen your job search accordingly. It stinks to commute for 2 hours, but if you're like me and you're from middle of nowhere, New Hampshire, you're gonna have to have a hard time finding a mom and pop shop that needs an entry-level cybersecurity person. I commuted 2 hours each way for the first 2 years of my career. I got through a lot of audiobooks and established that illustrious 2 years of experience to get you going. So I definitely recommend considering that if you're not from the city. My anecdote for the smaller companies in rural areas is that they can't afford to have more than one cybersecurity person, so they can't take the risk of having an entry-level person, whereas folks in the city have a lot more available, so they can help provide a stepping stone position for you. That's why there's so many jobs there, just the sheer number. Regarding certifications, I studied for the CISSP, this Security Plus by going to Barnes & Noble twice a week for a month or two and taking the CompTIA book off the shelf, studying it, and putting it back on the shelf without buying it. So
Corey, I think that's a crime. The Barnes & Noble police are going to come after you.
Yeah. Let's just edit that out and say the library or something. And then for CISSP, I'm a terrible test taker and I'm really anxious. And I honestly did not study for the CISSP, but I did pass it on my first try. And I attribute it to those generalist cybersecurity jobs that taught me what I need to know, paired with this test taking strategy of I noted why I thought each multiple choice answer was wrong because I'm a cynic. And I picked the one that I could argue with the least. So it's one of them, or it's like, this is dumb because of this, but I can't think of anything else. So that's probably the right answer. So if you're a negative person, I recommend that approach. If you have the experience, that you'll come to the conclusion that the test makers want you to come to. Also, when you're talking to these people, if you're shadowing, you don't have the job yet, but you're listening, maybe you're in another position at an institution and you're able to observe what people in security are doing. Don't just listen, but anticipate what your cybersecurity seniors will do in response to things that happen in the job. And that is, I think, a very effective way of actively listening when you have a learning opportunity. Ask questions shamelessly. Yeah, I would say I don't think I've ever regretted asking a question, even though it seemed like a terrible idea at the time. As long as you've been paying attention and you're not asking something that somebody just answered 2 seconds ago.
That's a good answer. Final thoughts or notes from the team about anything else, for advice for people getting into cybersecurity or even just skills you think are essential to succeed in cybersecurity. Katie.
Yeah, so in addition to what we were just talking about, obviously we've talked at length about how important curiosity is in this field. But one other thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about is how important it is to have empathy in this field. A lot of the times the clients that you're working with are either a single person or two people that are the entire cybersecurity shop for a company, and they're trying to understand what the threats are and try to make that case to their management. Or you've got a company that is going under audit and is under a lot of pressure and is trying to understand what their requirements are. And it can be a very high stress field for them in an area where they maybe don't have as much knowledge. So it's very important to have that understanding and kind of bring that in when working with your clients to help make it as approachable and understandable as possible, to try to make it a little bit less scary with the knowledge that you bring and kind of understand where they're coming from, and just kind of have that sympathetic ear and that patience and help them to understand what they need to know in order to succeed themselves so that you can help them succeed too. So I think it's very important.
I like that. Andrew or Corey, any other final parting thoughts?
Yeah, I this is kind of a luxury to say, but I think people shouldn't, they should take their time trying to find a career opportunity in cybersecurity. Don't just settle for any old company. Make sure that's a right fit for you. Make sure that it's a positive cybersecurity culture, because otherwise you'll end up working and you'll end up hating it, and it'll drive you away from cybersecurity. And that's not what people should be. You shouldn't base your opinions on cybersecurity based on one job or based on one client or based on one customer. It should always be based on your own passion and your own drive to succeed in cybersecurity. So with that said, like I said before, don't just jump into any company. Do your due diligence. Take a look at their culture. Like Corey said, try to make a contact there and sit down with them, talk about it, see what their pain points are. Is the culture the right fit for you? Coming from a consulting company that works with a lot of clients and kind of has a conveyor belt of people in there, it's a lot easier to get immersed in technology and find your passion for cybersecurity, maybe working in a smaller shop where you're the big dog, or where you are an important piece of the puzzle, not just somebody who's like a number on a sheet. So if you really want to get intimately familiar with cybersecurity, I would definitely push yourself towards maybe something with a smaller team, because you'll be more dependent on, but you'll have more learning opportunities, more hands-on stuff. One of the things I really loved about one of my previous jobs at Cvent was that they had these Tech Talk Tuesdays, basically, and they would have all the organization would have an hour, different teams, different weeks, different divisions, different parts of the company would all get on this call, and they would present something interesting about their line of work. So the security folks, all the different security teams would do one every couple of months. The sales folks, the engineers, the developers would all go through this process, and you would learn something new about everything in the company. And that's also one of the great learning tools that I forgot to mention before, is kind of take advantage of the things that companies offer. Companies with positive cybersecurity and positive relationship building qualities between teams and work groups. Take advantage of those things. The other thing that was really cool was we used to do these cross line of service groups at PwC, where we would go sit down and talk to people from other lines of service, risk assurance, tax, and we would kind of share our notes and share all of the information and share like the cool things that overlap, and that's the kind of discounted and not given enough attention to, is kind of like learning as much about other fields and other areas that you can, so you can bring that stuff and that knowledge into your cybersecurity work, especially if you're working in an industry where it's applicable. If you're working in cybersecurity for finance, cybersecurity for healthcare, a lot of that stuff makes your job easier and helps make you more confident in meetings with people that you may not be speaking to on a purely cybersecurity basis, business leaders, executive leadership, stuff like that. So that all really helps as well.
Corey, any final thoughts from you or anything else you want to reiterate?
I agree with those points. But I think in general, there's no magic required. You don't need to be a prodigy. Most people who are awesome, who are amazing cybersecurity professionals, are not geniuses. And so I see a lot of people get intimidated right away, and they're like, cybersecurity, encryption, like solving puzzles, no way. And it's like, that is the very, very tiny sliver of the job. So like, don't be afraid to give it a try and find something that works for you.
I love that. The good news is that is a lot of different stories from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different experiences. So hopefully you found all of that enlightening. That is all the time we have for today. I want to thank our team for joining the discussion and sharing their stories. From my side, I enjoyed talking about everything from Bitcoin and blockchain to audits to what certifications you need. And Corey, to your final point, not being intimidated by the industry, maybe not meeting some of those requirements to be able to apply to jobs. There's a chance you may be more qualified than you think, only because there's more jobs in the cybersecurity industry than you think. We hope you'll share this episode, though, with your friends who may be interested in entering the field of cybersecurity. There is room for everyone. We want to thank you again for joining us. And as always, our experts here at Hive Systems help make your cybersecurity journey more approachable. So reach out to us anytime by contacting us at www.hivesystems.io. Before we go, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can be alerted about our next episode by going to www.hivesystems.io/HiveLive. Next month, Corey is going to be talking about another quantitative cyber risk and Bayesian networks presentation So make sure you don't miss it by subscribing to our channel at www.hivesystems.io/HiveLive. Until next time, remember, when it comes to cybersecurity, you need to act and not react. Thank you for joining us.